Hey everyone, Nick Manning here, and in this video I'm going to show you how to ship your Dart code using Google Cloud Run. So in the last videos in my full Stack Flutter series, we were working on a front-end app and a back-end Dart web service API, so the full stack, and this is the kind of like the final video that rounds it out, where you'll be able to come away from this video having some familiarity with how to ship easily that Dart web service API and host it quite cheaply using Google Cloud Run. So to do this, we're going to have to learn some Docker basics, and Docker is a technology that lets you kind of containerize your application and ship it very easily. So if I containerize my app, I can deploy it to Amazon, Google, Azure, and a lot of other hosting services. So you'll come away from this video knowing some flexible, reusable skills, and I'll also show you how affordable Google Cloud Run is. It basically is a technology that lets you run your containers, your Docker containers, and you pay for what you use. So instead of paying a monthly fee like Heroku charges, $35 a month, if you want to host something with some actual substantial traffic, Google Cloud Run costs probably cents or dollars a month if you have like even moderate traffic. So what we're going to do is install Docker. We're going to build some Docker images, run some Docker containers, just kind of get a sense of how to use it as an end user. We're going to sign up for Google Cloud Platform to use that service, and we're going to be installing the gcloud CLI tool. So that's going to let us push our Docker images to the cloud and deploy an application. And I'll talk about container registry and intro to Google Cloud Run and actually deploying that image, as I said. So all the rough stuffs are here, and let's get started. So I'm not going to go through the exact steps of installing Docker, but what you can do is just search on Google and just search for install Docker. And here you'll see get Docker, and it'll give you instructions if you're a Mac, Windows, or Linux user, and what to do there. Okay, so assuming you have Docker installed already, let's try to ensure that the Docker actually works. So if you do have Docker installed, you should be able to run docker space run space hello-world. Now, if that runs successfully, you'll get a message up here saying hello from Docker. So let's talk about what actually happened there, right? I'm going to talk about two concepts. One is images and one is containers. That's basically the concepts you need to understand to use Docker as just an end user. You don't have to get anything advanced, any more advanced knowledge than that to kind of really leverage the power of Docker. So number one, Docker images are basically snapshots of your everything that your application needs, including your application in some kind of frozen state that Docker can use later. So if I have a Docker image for my backend web service app, it's going to contain the source code, and it's going to contain Dart as well, the runtime for Dart, and basically that's it. Let's see, I want to show you, like, expand on that by if we say like Docker images, it'll list all the images I have. So in this case, I said Docker run hello world, and I didn't have that image available to me. So where the heck did I get that? Basically, there are things called Docker image repositories. So the image repositories are kind of like GitHub repositories. You basically point Docker at a repository website or a repository source, and it will download the images for you. So the default repository for Docker is a website called dockerhub.com, and it's the same thing like github.com. So I'm going to say Docker Hub, and I'll just show you the website Docker Hub here, and you can search for any image you want, like anything you can imagine. They already have that. So if I say hello world at the top, this will show you the public image that anyone can use, hello world. And that's the one I was using. It'll just give you a description, how to use it, reviews, tags, etc. And that's it. So that's the concept of an image and an image repository. Docker's going to use Docker Hub automatically. Now, the second thing is containers. So when I say Docker run hello world, what that does is it downloads the image from dockerhub.com if I don't have it. And then what a container is, it's basically a running image. It could be stopped or started in a started state or stop state, but basically that image is kind of thawed, if you will. If you think of an image as something frozen, and it's thawed and it's actually run as a container, and each container is very unique. You can have 10 different containers running based on the same image. And they can have their own like state and everything like that. So when I say Docker run hello world, I'm downloading the image and I'm running it as a container. Containers can be accessed on certain ports. There's a lot of different features that go into running containers. So those are the two concepts. Images are just snapshots of your code and your runtime, and containers are the actual running piece of software that's totally self-contained. So if I have a Docker image with Google like Dart as the language, I don't have to install Dart on my host machine just to run that container. I could just run the container, and the container will already contain the Dart runtime in itself. It'll contain everything I need to run that application without having, totally self-contained, and the container can be killed, etc. as well. It can be deleted, and I can just run it again fresh. So that's just some concepts there. And let's continue here. So what we've done is we made sure that Docker was installed. And now I'm going to cover building Docker images. So let's see. I'm going to go into my code directory here, full stack Flutter, simple end-to-end app. And then we're on step 4, as I noted earlier. And then we're in the server directory. So I'm gonna let's make sure I'm all set here. So there's a file in here called a Docker file, and it's called Docker file title case. And let me just show you what that looks like here in the terminal. Cat Docker file. And this Docker file, I don't want to get into it in this tutorial, but it just contains all the instructions Docker would need rather, to package up your Docker image. At the very top line, it says we're going to base this container on Google's Dart runtime, and that is another Docker image that contains Dart and also the operating system that the code will run under. It'll just set some other working directories. It's going to copy all my code into the container. Again, you don't need to understand the actual syntax here. I'm just going through it on a high level. It's going to run pub get, which is Dart's tool to kind of get all the packages that the application needs. And then it just is going to say my entry point. Entry point is just what's going to be run when you start your Docker container. And it's going to run a file called main.dart. Main.dart is going to start the server. And then it's going to say my default port I can access this container is 8080. And that's just an environment variable as well. So that specifies that that port is that there's an environment variable, but that the container has access to called port. So how does the Docker file use? How is a Docker file used? So I have a next command I want to teach you is Docker build, and Docker build will take in an argument where it's and that argument is -t, which is tag. How do you want to tag what you're going to build? A tag is just a way of naming a Docker image, so you can just refer to it later by name. So I'm going to name it something called, let's just say, foobar-nick, right? And then the final command I have to give is a period. Period means that I want to run this Docker build command from the current directory, and that my Docker file is in the current directory. So don't forget that period when you run Docker build. So what Docker build is going to do, it's cranking away here. It's going to download anything it needs to download that the image requires. So if I need to pull Google Dart, which is the Dart runtime, it's going to download that and set that up. And then it's just going to go line by line through the Docker file and do what the Docker file wants it to do. It's going to copy all the source code in my current directory into the Docker file, and then it's going to run pub get, and then that's it. We're off to the races. So let's just wait for this to download Great. So it now built, and it says Docker successfully tagged this Docker image called foobar-nick. And the convention is the name of the Docker image is here, and then there's a colon, and then after the colon is the tag. So you can have, usually tags are like the version of your application. So if there's no tag provided, it will just say latest, right? So if I run Docker images, the command I ran just before, it'll show foobar-nick as an actual image that I can use. It has an image ID. It says when it was created, and it says it's 700 something megabytes, right? So now how do I run an actual Docker image as a container? Same way I did run hello world. But the thing is that I'm going to supply special arguments to Docker run. And let me just go over the very common arguments you're going to use for pretty much any Docker run command. So I'm going to say Docker run --rm, because that means that when I'm not running this container anymore, I want the container to be deleted. I don't want to keep the container around. Every container I run is kind of like it is created in the system, and if I'm not running it anymore, it's stopped. But containers can take up space in your system, so --rm make sure that after I've run it, it will kind of remove that container. So I'm just testing it out. The other command I'm going to have is --it, which stands for interactive terminal. And what that does, it runs your container in the foreground, meaning in the screen you have here in the terminal. And so that means that any kind of logs that come out of my application are going to show up on the screen here. That means it's an interactive terminal. Also, I can send I can kill the process with Control or Command C. So that means it's interactive. I can actually send commands, and if I say Control C, it'll say, oh, okay, I need to exit, and it'll stop running. And also what I'm going to do is check for the rest of the command here, actually, just to make sure. Let me just open my source code here, and I think I already have it open. Here's in the README. This is the same README that was on the website. And let's say run RMIT. Yeah, and they also have to give it a command, an argument that sets the port that I want to access the container on. So there's two ports to kind of understand when you're running a container. There's the port that the container exposes that is already specified. In our case, it's going to be 8080. So that's port is going to be exposed by our container. And there's also another port that you access the container with. And we're going to use a different port just for illustration here. So the way I specify that is -p, and then the port I want to access the container with. So I can say I want to access the container via port 8888, and then a colon, and then the actual physical port that the container is exposing, and that will be 8080. Okay. Let's see what the other rest of the command is, port. And then I just have to give the name of my image. So if I have an image called foobar-nick that I just built, colon, and then the tag, like say latest, it's going to run that. So let's see if this works. So it's docker run, and then these arguments, and then the name of the image. And let's see this in action. It just takes a second to start up. Wow, cool. It worked. So it says application started, and it says on port 8080 because that's what the actual container is exposing. Let's just test this out to see if our app is actually running. I'm just going to go to localhost 8888 because that's the port I specified that I want to access the container with. And look at that. We have a container here. It says hello everyone, and it looks like the container is working. Another thing is, let me open a new command prompt here, and I want to show you the container running actually. The container is running in a separate window, and if I run the command docker ps, meaning process, ps stands for process, it'll show me all of the current containers that are running. Each container has a unique ID, and then the name of the image, and what command I'm using. So the command is by default specified in the Docker file. And that's it. Let me just go back to my other window. I'm going to hit Control C or Command C on a Mac, and it's going to stop that container. And if I run docker ps again, it's not going to show that container any longer because I ran it as using the --rm argument. It's removed. So that's just a bit of tutorial on Docker images and containers. And the last thing I want to show you is how to take your image and upload it to your Docker repository, whatever repository that will be. It's kind of like transferring it's literally transferring the physical Docker image it's probably a few hundred megabytes large, and it's going to upload it. But the thing is that by default, Docker is going to be kind of pointing to the dockerhub.com repository. And that's kind of useless for me. It's only useful for me when I want to share different public images with other people. In this case, we're going to deploy our actual code to Google Cloud Platform. And so to do that, we're going to have to sign up with Google Cloud Platform and enable a feature there called Google Container Registry. And Google Container Registry is a place another like image repository that we're going to upload our images to so that Google can take that image and just deploy it easily. So let's go ahead and go to the Google's site and ensure we're signed up. So I'm going to Google Cloud just to get the link here. And what I'm going to do here is let me Google Cloud. Let's see. I'm going to go to cloud.google.com. Great. So we're going to say get started. Let me increase my text size. I'm going to say sign in because I already have an account. And I already have an account with my hello@manninglabs.com email address. And then after we signed up and everything, we're going to say go to console. Sorry, the screen is turning black for some reason. And let's see here. Let me expand the screen here. And here's our main dashboard for Google Console. So we signed up with Google Cloud. We are going to the console. This console is like a web application that lets you manage everything you're using with Google Cloud Platform. The next thing we're going to do, which I have already done, is we're going to go in the menu bar. We're going to go to billing. And I'm just going to make sure that I have billing set up. And it's not going to really cost you more than a few cents per month to actually run a simple web service API. This is some of the cost of another test application that I have here. But just make sure you enable billing. And then we're going to go to something called Container Registry in the menu here. If you have a hard time finding Container Registry, you can also go into the search bar here and search for Container Registry. And I'm going to click on that. And the first time, there's some test data here, so ignore that. But the first time I actually go to Container Registry, there's going to be a button that says Enable API. You have to enable the API for this to work, to actually use it and to have it accessible. So enable the API. The other thing you're going to have to do is create an actual project. So anything you do in Google Cloud Platform, you have to do under the context of a project. So if I go up to the menu here and I say new project, I won't go through it now, but you're going to create a project and give it a name. I gave mine foobar test. The important thing to note is that you need to know the ID of your project. So I would copy that down because we're going to use that with the command line tool later to kind of set our project and all that. So it's foobar test. That's my project name. You can name it whatever you want, but make sure you create a project. And then after you create a project, enable whatever service you want. So we're going to have Container Registry, and then we're going to have eventually Cloud Run here. So if you go to Cloud Run, enable that as well. I already have something called foobar test running, so just ignore that. Cool. So that's a little gist of how to set up Google Cloud Run and Google Cloud Platform specifically, and Container Registry. Make sure we have everything all set up. The next thing we need to do is install Google Cloud CLI tool. And the CLI tool will, the CLI tool will ensure that I can run my application from the command line and deploy stuff and push my images. So if I go to choose my operating system here, I'm on Linux, so I'm going to do that real quick. Okay, so it looks like gcloud was installed, and the first thing you need to do after the gcloud CLI tool is installed, again, it could be on Windows, Mac, Linux, it doesn't matter what operating system you're on, is I want to run gcloud space auth. And what auth is going to do is it's going to just authenticate the tool with the command auth init. I'm sorry. I think it's init. Yeah, gcloud init. My apologies. Auth is gonna be another command I'm gonna run in a second. Well, anyway, gcloud init is going to initialize gcloud and make sure that you're authenticated. The tool is authenticated with the account that you're signed in as at the moment. So 1 second, it's gonna crunch away here. And I'm gonna log in. It's gonna prompt me to log in. Let me go here in my Firefox web browser. Going to select the account that I'm signed in to Google Cloud Platform as at the moment. So be careful about that. I'm going to say allow. And then after I say allow, the console is going to, the website's going to say you're authenticated. The console going back to it will say you're logged in as certain whatever Google user. And then next you're going to pick the project that you've created. So in my case, I've created a project called foobar test. So I'm going to select number 4 in the list. And so anytime I run a command using the gcloud command line tool, it's going to always run that command in the context of that project. So if I have different projects that I'm working on, I can switch projects with a different command, which I won't go over right now because it's like overkill to do that. So that's it. That's what I have to do to set up gcloud. The second thing is I'm going to cover now how to upload an image to your repository so we can actually deploy it, right? Google Cloud can't just deploy the image unless it has that image, right? So as I mentioned earlier, the default image repository for Docker is dockerhub.com. Obviously, we're not going to use that right now. We're going to make sure that Docker can push images to Google Cloud. And to do that, we're going to say gcloud space auth space configure-docker. And what this is going to do, hit enter to configure it. It's going to configure Docker so that when you say Docker, hey, I want to push my image, it'll do that. The second thing I have to do is I'm going to go back here and show you container registry in Google Cloud Platform. Container registry is kind of like your buckets for all the images that you've uploaded, right? You don't create like repositories or directories here. It's going to basically create a image folder here based on the name of your image. So the image has to be named in a very specific way for this to work. You can't just name it whatever you want. You have to prefix your name of your image with your project ID, among other things. So I'm going to copy that. What I did was I went to the top here in the dropdown and I copied the ID. Make sure you're copying the actual ID. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say Docker build. I've built it before, so I'm going to build it now under a new name. I can alternatively use another command called docker tag, and that means I can rename the image, but I'm not going to do that. It's too advanced right now. I'm just going to rebuild it. So say docker build -t, and then I'm going to say gcr, that stands for Google Container Registry.io / the ID of my project that I got up at the top left here, ID, and then just whatever name of the image I want. So if my service is called like foobar nick hello, right? That's just the name of my service. Let's say I have a web service API, it's going to be called that. I'm also going to specify a version. I don't have to do this, but it's probably the best bet to do that so that when you deploy it later, you're clear on actually what you're deploying. So I'm going to say : And then I'm just going to give it a version like underscore, like colon v0.1, right? It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Lastly, I have to say space and then period. Remember that period because that gives Docker the context of where that Docker file is. And now we've successfully tagged my image, and it has to be gcr.io slash project ID slash, and then whatever name you want. Next, I'm going to copy this entire image name, and I'm going to say Docker space push space, and then paste in the name of that image. And if everything has been set up and configured properly, that should work. It's going to push that image, and it's going to take a minute or so to upload. And let's just wait for that. And okay, it's already done. And now, because I named it foobarnick hello, I'm going to refresh here. And now I get a directory here called foobarnick hello. And that's going to contain all the images that all the tagged images that I've uploaded. So if I go into foobarnick hello, this is the actual unique ID of the image I've uploaded, and it's going to say the tag. Like right now, it's version 01. And if that image is uploaded here, you're totally, everything is good. You can deploy this image using Google Cloud Platform, and that's what I'm going to be doing next. The one thing I do want to note before I go on is that like all this can be automated. This is not a typical setup when you want to set up more automation, like with actual CI/CD or continuous integration, continuous development. This is what most modern companies use. And for example, right, if and this will be in a subsequent video, which is whenever I push my code to, let's say, one of my GitHub branches, right? Let's say I push my code to the master branch or the main branch. I can set it so that Google Cloud Platform will automatically build my Docker image for me. I don't have to do it on the command line. It will automatically test that image out, and then I can choose to have it automatically deploy if I choose to, or I can deploy it manually. So all of this can be automated. I'm just showing you more of the manual steps to do that. But if you're just doing a pet project or you're just getting started learning, I don't typically set up that automation. I just do that only if it's like a real project. Like pushing images manually is totally fine. The benefit of pushing images manually is that I can actually test them out myself on my computer, see if they work before I push them and all that, which I've done. I've already tested and we ran that image, so it looks good. So just to let you know, CI/CD is a big topic. You can get really into the weeds with it. Only use it in kind of like layers. Like you don't have to go overboard, because sometimes it can be very time consuming if something goes wrong and you're not working on your project anymore. You're just basically troubleshooting CI/CD issues. So that's no good. Okay, so let's continue here. Going back to our repository and looking at the steps, we've installed Google Cloud. We've had an intro to what container registry is. We've pushed an image to Google Cloud. And now I'm going to go into the introduction to Google Cloud Run and how we actually deploy our service. So let's get back into it. Okay, so next I'm going to deploy my Docker container using the image that was uploaded. There's two ways to do that. One is using the gcloud command line tool to just say, hey, I want to deploy an app and here's the image and that's it. Another way to do it is from the web UI. Let me try with the web UI first just to show you how it works. I'm going to go to Google Cloud Run, say create service at the top here. There's a plus button at the very top here. I'm going to just leave it to say fully managed. So I'm just going to keep the Google Run fully managed option selected. I can select my region though if I want to. I'm going to give it a service name. I'm going to say foobarnick whatever. It doesn't really matter. -test1, for example. I'm going to say next, and then I'm going to select my container image URL that I've uploaded. So I can go into here, and these are all the images I uploaded. And the one I did was foobarnick hello, if you remember just a couple minutes ago. I'm going to select the image I've uploaded, and then I'm going to go into advanced settings. And what I have to do here, leave all the existing arguments the same way as it is. I'm going to go to memory allocated, and I'm going to say 1 gigabyte. That's really important, or else your container won't start for Aqueduct applications. So Aqueduct is the web framework that we're using for Dart on the back end, as you know. And unfortunately, it takes a lot of memory, like 600 something, when it spikes to 600 something when it starts up, when a container starts up. So for there to not cause any problems, we just need to be able to handle the memory spike there, and just allocate a gig for now, and all of that. I'm going to say next, and then I'm going to say allow unauthenticated invocations. So that means that Google Cloud Platform won't ask anyone for a username and password just to use the web service API. It's totally public, anybody can use it. And then I'm going to say create, and then it's going to take about a minute and a half or a minute to create. What it's going to do here, and while that's cranking away, I'll give a kind of overview on the web UI. This is your service, and also, so first of all, there's different kind of like tabs here. One is the metrics. So these are all your kind of like charts and all that on your performance, latency, memory utilizations, number of requests, etc. Second tab is revisions. So every time I deploy a new service, what I'm going to do is I'm going to point that, I'm going to say, hey, here's the new image I want to deploy as a container. It will kind of like stop the old container after that new container is fully running and working properly. If it doesn't work properly and it doesn't deploy well, it'll keep the old container running. So it's pretty much zero downtime deployments, which is really nice. Logs is a tab bar showing all the output logs from my actual application. So that's very, very useful when I want to troubleshoot something. Google also has other tools to kind of like sift through log files and all that if you really want to do something more advanced. Triggers is more of an advanced concept. I'll go into another tutorial video. Yeah, details, YAML, this is like the actual nitty-gritty configuration for the app and everything. So it looks like things ran. So looking at the revisions, it says it was deployed a minute ago, 100% of traffic is going there. And it's going to, you can access this via this URL. So if you see up here, it says URL, it's going to give you a kind of randomly generated URL, and you can map that later to your own custom domain. That's it. Let me click that and let's see if it worked. The first time a container is accessed on Google Cloud Run, if it hasn't been accessed in a very long time, it may take a little bit of time to start, be accessible, because it has to kind of wake up. So this is mainly for when you first deploy your very first service. Subsequent calls after that are actually quite fast. So as you can see, everything is working. I have this message that says, hello everyone, and that's it. So that's how you deploy something with the web interface with Google Cloud Run. Okay, so lastly, I want to show you how to deploy your image via the command line tool. So basically, it's going to be gcloud run and then deploy. So gcloud space run space deploy. I give it an image name, so -- image space, and then the exact path to the image that I've uploaded. So when we use Docker push, that's going to be the same image name that we've used and the actual tag I want to deploy. So gcrao foobar test blah 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 blah. Then because I want to use a gigabyte of memory for this service, I want to specify that. So I do -- memory and then space and then 1 capital G lowercase I. And I think that should be the command. And then I'm getting presented with the same choices I did with the web interface. So I'm going to say I want option number 1, Google Cloud Run fully managed. And then I'm going to give it a service name. I'm going to name it something different, foobar -nick -hello -test 2. And then I'm going to select my region. I'll just select US East 1, option 19. And then do I want to allow unauthenticated invocations? I'm going to say Y for yes. And it's going to crunch away and then let me know when it is working. It shouldn't take too long though. Creating service, creating revision. Again, a revision is every time you deploy something, it replaces the old container with the new container. So that's a revision. Great, now it worked. So it gives me the service URL. I can just copy that. And then I can access that here. Let me just go to that URL and it should work. So it's going to take a few seconds for it to be accessed for the very first time, and then that should be pretty fast after that. And while it's crunching away, if I go back into listing my services, I have foobar, Nick, test 1 and 2 here. So in a more realistic application or setting, you can have a staging service, you can have a production service, and have your app point to different versions of that. And cool, it looked like it worked. Hello, everyone. So that's my tutorial on how to deploy dark code using Docker and Google Cloud Platform. It's very easy to do and it's very affordable. And basically, the reason why I don't use Heroku is that Heroku is a little bit too bespoke for me. And also it's very expensive. So Heroku, is free to start off with, but it's very slow performance. And sometimes when your application goes to sleep, it hasn't been accessed by any users in a while. If that it's accessed again later, it takes many, many, many seconds for it actually to wake up and start working. And then if you want higher performance, it jumps to $35 a month. Whereas Google Cloud Run, you scale as you go and you pay for what you get what you pay for. So if no one's using your application, you're not going to be charged. And that's really interesting. If there's not a lot of traffic, it's very affordable. If there is a lot of traffic, you'll scale and it'll cost you whatever you need. So it's very efficient. The second problem I have with Heroku is that Heroku uses very domain-specific language and configuration just to kind of get it to work. So if that's the only thing you're using and you're using Heroku a lot, it's fine. But if you want to have, you don't need to learn Docker or anything like that. But as soon as you want to switch to another cloud provider, platform as a service like AWS, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, etc., you're going to have to start learning more like fundamental skills like Docker, and which are transferable. They're usable in any context. And so, using Docker is more of a flexible way to kind of like work with your applications without having to learn something very bespoke. So those are my two reasons. And I think every developer should be a competent full stack engineer if they can, or at least learn a little bit about it, especially in the mobile world. And I think this will get your feet wet, and we'll have more tutorials on doing more CI/CD and automating your development process. So hope that was fun, and see you guys later.